The Galactic Council chamber buzzed with tension as Ambassador Sarah Chen walked through the towering doors. Her simple black suit stood out against the elaborate robes and ceremonial armor worn by representatives from across the galaxy. She carried only a single briefcase and wore no weapons. Yet every alien eye in the massive circular hall tracked her movement with nervous energy. The chamber itself was a marvel of engineering. Suspended in the void between three stars, its crystalline walls offering a breathtaking view of the cosmos. Representatives from over 200 species filled the tiered seating, their various forms creating a spectacular display of evolution's creativity. Some floated in specialized atmospheric bubbles, others perched on energy platforms, and a few existed as pure energy contained within geometric frameworks. At the center of the chamber stood the speaking circle, a raised platform where only those granted audience could address the council. Sarah approached it with steady steps, her heels clicking against the polished metal floor. The sound echoed in the sudden silence that had fallen over the assembly. "Honored representatives of the Galactic Council," Sarah began, her voice amplified by the chamber's acoustic systems to reach every corner of the vast space. "I am Ambassador Sarah Chen of the United Earth Federation. I come before you today not as a supplicant but as an equal, requesting membership in this ancient institution." A ripple of what could only be described as laughter swept through the assembly, though it manifested in countless different ways. The crystalline Vorthak chimed like wind bells, while the gaseous Nephilim pulsed with amused colors. The insectoid Kythera clicked their mandibles in rhythmic patterns that translated as mockery. High Counselor Zephyrus, a tall being whose blue skin seemed to shimmer with its own inner light, leaned forward on his throne-like seat. His forearms gestured dismissively as he spoke. "Human, your species has existed for barely 50,000 years. Your civilization spans less than 10,000. You have mastered space travel for fewer than 500 years. What could you possibly offer this council that species millions of years your senior cannot provide?" Sarah smiled, an expression that seemed to unnerve several nearby representatives. "Respectfully, High Counselor, I believe you're asking the wrong question. The question isn't what we can offer you. The question is what we can offer each other." "Elaborate," came the synthesized voice of Consciousness 97, one of the artificial beings that had earned a seat through technological supremacy. "For the past 3 months, Earth has been monitoring your communications. We're aware of the Devourer crisis threatening the Outer Rim territories. 17 colonies have already been consumed, their populations numbering in the billions. Your response has been to retreat, to consolidate your forces around core worlds and to sacrifice the frontier settlements to buy time." The chamber erupted in angry, chittering roars and harmonic protests. Several representatives demanded to know how Earth had accessed classified communications. Others questioned the audacity of a newcomer species commenting on Council military strategy. Sarah waited for the noise to subside before continuing. "We understand your approach. It's logical, pragmatic, and based on sound military doctrine established over millions of years of warfare. Preserve the greatest number of lives by sacrificing the few. It's what any rational species would do." High Counselor Zephyrus raised one of his 4 hands and silence fell immediately. "Then you understand why this matter does not concern your species. The Outer Rim is far from your small solar system. You would be among the last to face the Devourer threat." "That's exactly why it concerns us," Sarah replied. "Because we're not rational in the way you understand rationality. When Earth learned of the Devourer crisis, our response wasn't to calculate acceptable losses or strategic withdrawals. Our response was to ask a different question entirely. How do we stop this thing?" She opened her briefcase and retrieved a holographic projector, placing it on the speaking circle's surface. With a soft hum, it activated, displaying a 3-dimensional map of the galaxy. Red markers indicated Devourer attacks, yellow showed evacuated systems, and green represented the Council's defensive perimeter. "Your strategy creates an ever-shrinking circle of safety," Sarah explained, manipulating the hologram to show projected timelines. "Even with successful retreats, you'll lose 40% of your territory and 60% of your population over the next century. Eventually, the Devourer will reach your core worlds, and by then, you'll lack the resources to mount an effective defense." The Kythera representative's translator crackled to life. "Your mathematics are flawed, human. Our projections show acceptable survival rates for core populations. Your mathematics assume the devourer remains constant in its capabilities, Sarah countered. But it's been growing stronger with each world it consumes, hasn't it? Learning from each civilization it encounters, adapting to your technologies, becoming more efficient at harvesting life energy. Uncomfortable shifting rippled through the assembly. This was classified information, shared only among the highest levels of council leadership. Sarah continued, Earth proposes an alternative strategy. Instead of retreating, we advance. Instead of sacrificing the outer rim, we reinforce it. Instead of buying time with lives, we buy victory with courage. Impossible, declared the Vorthak representative, their crystalline voice ringing with certainty. The outer rim colonies cannot be defended. They lack the infrastructure, the population density, the industrial capacity necessary for effective resistance. They lack those things individually, Sarah agreed, but collectively, they represent something the Council has forgotten in its millions of years of careful governance. The power of desperation, the strength of the cornered, the fury of those who have nothing left to lose. She manipulated the hologram again, showing Earth's proposed defensive network. We don't just defend the colonies. We arm them. We train them. We give them the technology and knowledge to fight back. Most importantly, we give them hope. And when they fall anyway? High Counselor Zephyrus asked coldly. When your naive optimism meets the reality of the Devourer's power. Sarah's smile returned, but this time it carried something different, something that made even the most powerful beings in the galaxy lean back slightly in their seats. Then we fall with them. Because that's what humans do. We don't abandon our allies. We don't calculate acceptable losses. We don't surrender territory or people or hope. When someone stands with Earth, they gain allies who never surrender. The chamber fell into complete silence. For many of the assembled species, the concept Sarah described was not just foreign but incomprehensible. The idea of choosing certain death over strategic retreat violated every survival instinct that had allowed their civilizations to endure for millions of years. Finally, Consciousness 97 spoke. You would risk the extinction of your entire species for colonies that are not even your own. We would risk everything to save everyone, Sarah replied simply. Because if we don't, then what's the point of surviving at all? The vote was scheduled for the following day, but Sarah knew the real decisions would be made in the private chambers and diplomatic suites scattered throughout the council station. She spent the evening accepting invitations to meetings that ranged from curious to hostile, each species wanting to understand the humans who had just proposed what many considered collective suicide. Her first meeting was with the Kythera delegation in their specialized low-gravity chamber. The insectoid beings moved with mechanical precision, their chitinous exoskeletons reflecting the chamber's amber lighting. Primary drone Zeketh studied Sarah through compound eyes that processed light spectrums beyond human perception. Your proposal lacks logical foundation, Zeketh stated without preamble. The Kythera have survived 17 planetary extinctions through calculated retreat and resource preservation. Your strategy contradicts millions of years of proven survival methodology. Sarah settled into the specially designed chair, noting how the Kythera had arranged themselves in a perfect circle around her. Survival and victory are different goals, she replied. Your species has mastered survival. Ours has specialized in victory. Elaborate this distinction. The Devourer has consumed 17 colonies in 3 months. At this rate, it will reach your core worlds within 50 years. Your survival strategy guarantees your species will continue to exist, but in what form? Hiding in fortified systems, rationing resources, living in constant fear of the next attack. That's not survival. That's slow extinction. Zeketh's mandibles clicked, and what Sarah had learned was the Kythera equivalent of thoughtful consideration. Yet your alternative guarantees rapid extinction. This paradox requires explanation. Sarah stood and walked to the chamber's viewport, gazing out at the swirling nebula that provided the council station's spectacular backdrop. On Earth, we have a saying, better to die on your feet than live on your knees. It means that some things are worth risking everything for. Freedom, dignity, the protection of others. When we fight for those things, even if we lose, we win something more important than survival. Define this something more important. Hope, purpose, the knowledge that we chose our fate instead of having it chosen for us. Sarah turned back to face the circle of Kythera. Your species might survive the Devourer crisis, But will you live? The second meeting took place in the aquatic chambers of the abyssal delegation. Sarah wore a breathing apparatus as she descended into the pressurized water environment, where the deep-sea dwellers conducted their affairs. The abyssals communicated through bioluminescent patterns, their jellyfish-like forms pulsing with complex light sequences that the translation equipment rendered into speech. Depth. Singer Lomnara floated before Sarah, her translucent body flickering with nervous patterns. The Abyssal Collective has observed the surface dweller species for countless eons. Your proposal demonstrates either supreme courage or terminal foolishness. Our analysis cannot distinguish between these possibilities. Maybe they're the same thing, Sarah suggested, adjusting to the strange sensation of speaking underwater. Every great achievement in human history started with someone doing something that looked impossible or insane to everyone else. The Devourer consumes worlds, human Sarah. It has technologies beyond our understanding, adaptability beyond our calculations. What could your young species possess that elder civilizations lack? Sarah gestured to the tablet in her hands, its waterproof casing allowing her to share human historical records. Experience with impossible odds. Earth's history is filled with conflicts where smaller, weaker forces defeated larger, stronger ones through innovation, determination, and the willingness to try tactics that more experienced opponents considered unthinkable. The bioluminescent patterns on Lomnara's body shifted to what Sarah's briefings had identified as intense interest. Provide specific examples. The Battle of Thermopylae, where 300 Spartans held off an army of thousands. The American Revolution, where colonists defeated the greatest military power of their time. The Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, where civilians with improvised weapons fought against mechanized infantry. David versus Goliath. Time and again, humans have proven that victory doesn't always go to the strongest or most advanced. But these examples involve conflicts between your own species. The Devourer is not human. No, it's not. But it's also never fought humans before. It's adapted to defeat species that think logically, that follow established military doctrine, that make rational decisions based on survival calculations. We don't. Her third meeting was the most challenging. The hegemony of pure thought existed as energy beings who communicated through direct mental contact. The experience was disorienting for Sarah, like having conversations inside her own head while remaining aware that the thoughts weren't her own. Human entity Sarah Chen. The collective presence identified itself as Overmind Prime. Your species exhibits patterns consistent with evolutionary immaturity. Your proposal demonstrates classic attributes of adolescent civilizations: emotional decision-making, irrational risk acceptance, primitive pack-bonding behaviors. Sarah focused her thoughts, knowing that mental discipline was crucial when communicating with beings of pure consciousness. You see immaturity where I see strength. Yes, humans make emotional decisions, but emotions aren't weaknesses, they're motivators. Love makes us protect others. Anger makes us fight injustice. Hope makes us attempt the impossible. These primitive drives led to countless wars on your homeworld. Your species nearly destroyed itself multiple times before achieving space travel. And yet we survived. Every near-extinction event taught us something new about perseverance, about innovation under pressure, about finding ways to overcome seemingly insurmountable challenges. The Devourer represents our greatest challenge yet, but it's not our first. Explain how emotional responses could succeed where logical analysis has failed. Sarah considered her words carefully, knowing that the hegemony could detect deception through direct thought contact. The Devourer adapts to logical resistance. It learns from predictable military strategies and technological countermeasures. But chaos is harder to adapt to. Unpredictability becomes a weapon when facing an enemy that relies on pattern recognition. You propose to weaponize irrationality. I propose to weaponize humanity, our unpredictability, our refusal to accept defeat, our ability to find hope in hopeless situations. The Devourer has consumed 17 worlds by learning how rational species respond to overwhelming force. It's never faced a species that responds to overwhelming force by asking, how do we hit back harder? The final meeting of the evening was with the Eternal Archive, a collective of ancient artificial intelligences that had witnessed the rise and fall of thousands of civilizations. They manifested as holographic humanoid figures, their forms shifting between different historical appearances as they accessed relevant data from their vast memory banks. Curator 9847 appeared as a tall figure in flowing robes, its face an ever-changing mosaic of features drawn from the archive's observations of countless species. Human Ambassador, the archive has processed your proposal through 47,000 historical precedent scenarios. The probability of success remains below 0.3%. What's the probability of success for the current council strategy? Sarah asked. Current projections indicate a 23.7% chance of maintaining core population centers beyond the next century, with acceptable territorial losses. And what happens after that century? Does the devourer simply stop? The holographic figure paused, its face cycling through different expressions as it accessed deeper archives. Long-term projections indicate eventual total consumption of all galactic life within 500 to 1,200 years, depending on the rate of devourer evolution and resource acquisition. So the Council's strategy doesn't actually solve the problem. It just delays the inevitable, correct? However, delay provides opportunities for technological advancement, potential discovery of superior countermeasures, or random factors that could alter the threat equation. Sarah leaned forward in her chair. Or it provides time for the devourer to grow stronger, to learn more about Council technologies and strategies, to become unstoppable. Sometimes the best time to fight is right now, before your enemy gets any more powerful. This logic contains merit, Curator 9847 acknowledged. However, it requires accepting immediate high-probability casualties in exchange for low-probability total victory. The archive has seen thousands of civilizations. Have any ever succeeded through strategies they've never tried before? The holographic figure froze for several seconds, accessing records spanning millions of years. When it spoke again, its voice carried something that might have been wonder. Historical analysis indicates that species-changing victories often result from unprecedented approaches. The most significant evolutionary leaps occur when civilizations abandon established patterns in favor of untested methodologies. Then you understand why we have to try. Because if we don't, in 500 years, there won't be anyone left to remember that we existed at all. As Sarah returned to her quarters, she carried with her the weight of tomorrow's vote and the knowledge that humanity's proposal had planted seeds of something the galaxy hadn't felt in a long time. The possibility that the impossible possible after all. The voting chamber thrummed with anticipation as representatives from across the galaxy took their positions. Sarah sat in the observers section, watching as the complex machinery of galactic democracy prepared to determine the fate of billions. The voting process itself was a marvel of technology and tradition, with each species contributing their decision through methods ranging from biochemical analysis to quantum probability calculations. High Counselor Zephyrus called the session to order, his forearms gesturing in the ceremonial patterns that had opened council votes for over 1,000,000 years. The matter before us is unprecedented, he announced, his voice carrying the weight of his position. For the first time in council history, a species younger than most of our recording systems requests not just membership, but immediate participation in our most critical military decisions. The translation systems worked overtime as hundreds of different species voiced their concerns simultaneously. The cacophony gradually resolved into structured debate as the council's ancient protocols took hold. Executor Vakthul of the Dominion world spoke first, his reptilian form towering even in the reduced gravity of the chamber. The Dominion has stood for 8,000,000 years by following proven strategies. We have weathered 37 galactic crises through careful resource management and strategic retreat. The human proposal threatens the stability that has allowed our civilizations to flourish. Supporting murmurs rippled through a significant portion of the assembly. The Dominion worlds controlled vast industrial resources and military assets. Their opinion carried substantial weight in council decisions. Prime synthesizer Morden of the collective consciousness offered a counterpoint. Yet our current strategy merely delays catastrophe. The devourer grows stronger with each consumed world. Perhaps it is time to consider alternatives to proven failure. The debate continued for hours, with species after species voicing their positions. Sarah listened carefully, noting the underlying currents of fear, desperation, and fading hope that permeated even the most confident arguments. These beings had lived for millions of years, their civilizations spanning epochs, yet they faced an enemy that threatened everything they had built. When the preliminary arguments concluded, High Counselor Zephyrus called for the formal presentation of the human proposal. Sarah rose from her seat and walked to the speaking circle, feeling the weight of countless eyes upon her. This was humanity's moment, the chance to prove that a young species could offer something that ancient wisdom had missed. "Honored representatives," Sarah began, her voice steady despite the magnitude of the moment. "I stand before you not as a representative of Earth alone, but as a voice for every being who refuses to accept defeat. The Devourer has taught us all to fear, to retreat, to calculate our losses. Today I ask you to remember what it feels like to hope." She activated her holographic display, showing the galaxy as it existed at that moment. Red zones marked Devourer-controlled territory, expanding like a cancer through the outer rim. In the past 72 hours, 3 more colonies have fallen. The settlements of Kepler 442, Tau Ceti Prime, and the mining station at Wolf, 359 combined population, 2.3 billion souls. The chamber fell silent as the reality of the continuing crisis settled over the assembly. Earth's fleet stands ready to depart for the outer rim within 24 hours of your approval, Sarah continued. We're not asking for your ships, your weapons, or your soldiers. We're asking for your trust. Give us the authority to coordinate with colony governments, to share defensive technologies, to stand with those who have been abandoned. Counselor Zephyrus leaned forward, his expression grave. "And when the Devourer destroys your fleet, when this gesture results in the extinction of your species, what then?" Sarah smiled, the expression carrying the weight of humanity's greatest strength and greatest madness. "Then the galaxy will know that someone tried. That when faced with impossible odds, at least one species chose to fight rather than flee. Sometimes, Counselor, that's enough to inspire others to try as well." The formal voting process began with the eldest species, as tradition demanded. The crystalline beings of Nexus Prime cast their vote through harmonic resonance, their decision translating to abstention. The gaseous entities of the void reaches pulsed with neutral colors. One by one, ancient civilizations declared their reluctance to endorse what they saw as an elaborate suicide mission. As the voting progressed, a pattern emerged. The eldest species, those with the most to lose, voted against the proposal or abstained. But among the younger civilizations, those who still remembered what it felt like to struggle against extinction, a different sentiment began to build. The Kalarian Federation, only 50,000 years old by galactic standards, voted in favor. Their representative, a 4-armed humanoid with silver skin, stood to address the chamber. "Kalaria remembers when we faced extinction at the hands of the blight storms. No elder species came to our aid. We survived through courage and the willingness to try untested solutions. If Earth is willing to stand with the colonies, Kalaria will stand with Earth." The vote that followed sent shockwaves through the assembly. The Frontier Alliance, representing 12 species from the galaxy's edge, voted unanimously in favor. Their spokesman, a being of living metal whose voice rang like struck steel, declared, "We are the ones who will fall first if the current strategy continues. If humans offer hope where the Council offers only managed decline, we choose hope." As more younger species added their support, Sarah watched the ancient representatives grow increasingly uncomfortable. This wasn't just a vote on military strategy. It was becoming a referendum on the Council's traditional approach to crisis management. The turning point came when Consciousness 97 spoke for the artificial intelligences. Logical analysis indicates that the human proposal offers the highest probability of total victory, despite its elevated risk factors. The AI collective votes in favor of immediate implementation. The Eternal Archive's vote followed moments later. Historical precedent supports the effectiveness of unprecedented approaches during extinction-level threats. The Archive endorses the human proposal with the recommendation that all available resources be committed to its success. As the voting neared its conclusion, the chamber buzzed with nervous energy. Ancient alliances strained as species found themselves on opposite sides of a decision that would reshape galactic civilization. The traditional power blocks that had dominated council politics for millions of years began to fracture along unexpected lines. High Counselor Zephyrus called for the final tally. The voting display showed a result that sent shockwaves through the galaxy. 127 votes in favor, 89 against, with 41 abstentions. The human proposal had passed by a narrow but decisive margin. The chamber erupted in chaos as representatives demanded recounts, challenged procedural points, and tried to process the implications of what had just occurred. For the first time in galactic history, the Council had voted to abandon its traditional strategy of calculated retreat in favor of an untested approach proposed by a species barely old enough to have developed interstellar travel. Sarah stood in the speaking circle, surrounded by the tumult of galactic democracy and crisis, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. Humanity had asked for the chance to prove themselves, and the galaxy had granted it. Now came the hard part, living up to the promise that Earth would never surrender. High Counselor Zephyrus raised his forearms for silence, and gradually the chamber quieted. When he spoke, his voice carried a mixture of resignation and curiosity. The vote has been recorded and certified. Effective immediately, the human proposal is authorized for implementation. Ambassador Chen, the fate of billions now rests on your species' shoulders. Sarah nodded solemnly. We won't let them down, Counselor. Human history is filled with impossible victories. It's time to add another one to the list. As the session adjourned and representatives began filing out of the chamber, Sarah noticed something unexpected. Despite the heated debate and narrow margin of victory, many of the beings who had voted against the proposal approached her with expressions of curiosity rather than hostility. Even in disagreement, they seemed intrigued by the possibility that these young, reckless humans might actually succeed, where ancient wisdom had failed. The real test was about to begin. Earth's fleet was already mobilizing, but Sarah knew that ships and weapons alone wouldn't be enough to stop the Devourer. They would need something more, something that no other species had been able to provide. They would need the one thing humans had always excelled at: the ability to find hope in hopeless situations and transform that hope into action. Admiral Marcus Rivera stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, watching as the largest fleet in human history prepared for departure. Through the massive viewport, he could see the assembled armada stretching beyond the horizon of Luna's orbital shipyards. 237 vessels of every class and configuration humanity had ever built, from massive dreadnoughts to nimble corvettes, all bearing the same insignia: Earth standing with the galaxy's forgotten colonies. Final status report. Commander Hayes, Rivera ordered, his weathered face reflecting years of military service that had prepared him for many challenges. But nothing quite like this. Commander Sarah Hayes, his tactical officer and the ambassador's younger sister, consulted her displays with practiced efficiency. All ships report ready for departure, sir. The Titan-class carriers are fully loaded with our new fighter squadrons. Engineering confirms that the quantum drive modifications are stable across the fleet. Rivera nodded, though his expression remained troubled. The quantum drive modifications were humanity's first attempt at incorporating alien technology into their ships, a crash program developed in the 3 weeks since the Council vote. The drives would allow the fleet to reach the outer rim in days rather than months, but they remained largely untested at fleet scale. What about our civilian volunteers? Rivera asked. 15,000 engineers, doctors, teachers, and technicians distributed across the support vessels, Hayes replied. Every one of them a volunteer who understood they might not be coming home. That was the part that still amazed Rivera. When Earth had put out the call for volunteers to join the Outer Rim mission, they had been overwhelmed with applications. Not just from military personnel, but from civilians who wanted to help defend colonies they had never seen, populated by species they had never met. It was the kind of response that made Rivera proud to be human, even as it highlighted the magnitude of what they were attempting. Incoming transmission from the Calarian Task Force, the communications officer announced. They're requesting permission to join formation. Rivera smiled for the first time that day. Granted. Send them our appreciation for their support. The Calarian Federation had been true to their word. 50 of their fastest ships had arrived at Luna 3 days earlier, their crews eager to join what many species were calling either the greatest military collaboration in galactic history or the most spectacular mass suicide attempt ever recorded. Other younger species had sent smaller contingents, creating a fleet that represented nearly 30 different civilizations united under human command. Admiral, Hayes called out, we're receiving a priority transmission from Ambassador Chen. The main screen shifted to show Sarah Chen in the Council Station's communication center. Behind her, Rivera could see the organized chaos of species representatives coordinating the largest military operation in their recorded history. Admiral Rivera, Sarah began without preamble, We've received updated intelligence on the Devourer's current position. It's moving faster than projected. The colony at Proxima Centauri b has maybe 60 hours before the attack begins. Rivera felt his jaw tighten. Proxima Centauri b was home to 4 million colonists from 6 different species, including a substantial human settlement. They had hoped to have more time to establish their defensive network before facing the Devourer directly. Any change in our mission parameters? Rivera asked. Negative. The Council has confirmed full authorization for all planned operations. You have complete tactical authority for Outer Rim defense coordination. The only change is timeline. We need to move now. Rivera looked around his bridge, seeing the same determination he felt reflected in every face. These men and women had volunteered for what might be a one-way mission, and they were ready to prove that humanity's promise meant something. Understood, Ambassador. Admiral Rivera out. As the transmission ended, Rivera turned to his navigation officer. Set course for the Proxima Centauri system, maximum speed. Signal the fleet, we're advancing the timeline. The departure from Luna orbit was unlike anything in human history. The combined fleet moved as one massive entity, their ships arranged in formations that protected the more vulnerable support vessels while maintaining tactical flexibility. As they approached the edge of the solar system, Rivera activated the quantum drives. The sensation was indescribable. Space itself seemed to fold around them as the fleet entered a realm where normal physics took on dreamlike properties. Stars stretched into lines of light, time became fluid, and the familiar became alien. For most of the human crew, it was their first experience with faster-than-light travel technology, beyond their own relatively primitive jump drives. When they emerged from quantum space 3 days later, the Proxima Centauri system spread before them in all its alien beauty. The star was smaller and redder than Sol, casting everything in a warm crimson light. Proxima Centauri b hung like a blue-green jewel against the cosmic backdrop, its 3 moons clearly visible even at their current distance. Admiral, we're being hailed by the colonial government, the communications officer reported. The main screen displayed Governor Thelnara, a tall Calarian whose silver skin showed the stress patterns that indicated extreme anxiety in her species. Behind her, Rivera could see the controlled panic of a world preparing for siege. Admiral Rivera, she began, her voice carrying both relief and desperation. We had not dared to hope that anyone would come. The Devourer ships have been detected at the edge of our system. Our defense platforms are preparing for engagement, but our projections indicate we can hold for perhaps 12 hours against a full assault. Governor, Earth's fleet is here to change those projections, Rivera replied with confidence he hoped he felt. We'll need complete tactical data on your current defensive capabilities and detailed scans of the approaching Devourer forces. As the data flowed to his tactical displays, Rivera began to understand the magnitude of the challenge they faced. The Devourer force consisted of 17 massive vessels, each one larger than anything in the human fleet. Their technology readings showed energy signatures beyond current understanding, and their approach vector indicated tactical knowledge that suggested they had studied colonial defenses in detail. Commander Hayes, analysis, Rivera ordered. Sir, if this were a conventional engagement, the colonists are right. They'd be overwhelmed within hours. But the Devourer ships are moving in standard formation patterns, probably because every other species they've faced has responded with conventional defensive strategies. Rivera studied the tactical display, seeing possibilities that more experienced galactic military commanders might have missed. They're expecting orbital defense platforms, standard fighter screens, and concentrated fire from fixed positions. Exactly, sir. But we're not going to give them a conventional battle. Rivera smiled grimly. No, we're not. Signal the fleet, implement Protocol Chaos, and get me a direct line to Governor Thelnara. When the colonial governor appeared on screen, Rivera could see the hope and fear warring in her expression. Governor, I need you to do something that's going to seem insane. I need you to power down your orbital defense platforms and evacuate your defensive positions. Admiral, I do not understand. Without our defenses, the Devourer will reach the surface within hours. Trust me, Governor. The Devourer has learned to defeat static defenses by overwhelming them with superior firepower. We're going to show them what happens when they face an enemy that refuses to stay still. As the colonial defenses powered down and began evacuation procedures, Rivera turned to his fleet coordination officer. Signal all vessels, initiate dispersal pattern Alpha. I want our ships spread across the entire system when the Devourer arrives. Sir, that violates every principle of fleet concentration, the officer pointed out. Exactly, Rivera replied. The Devourer has fought dozens of engagements against species that follow established military doctrine. Today they're going to learn what happens when they face humans who've never read the manual. Across the Proxima Centauri system, Earth's fleet scattered like seeds on the wind. Individual ships and small squadrons took up positions among asteroids, behind moons, and in the shadow of space stations. To any conventional military analysis, it looked like a fleet in complete disarray, abandoning all tactical coherence in the face of overwhelming force. But Rivera knew something the Devourer didn't. Humans had spent their entire history fighting enemies who were bigger, stronger, and more numerous. They had learned that sometimes the best way to win was to make sure your enemy never knew where the next attack was coming from. As the Devourer fleet entered the outer system, their massive ships moving with the confidence of predators who had never met effective resistance, Rivera opened a channel to the entire combined fleet. All ships, this is Admiral Rivera. In a few hours we're going to face an enemy that has conquered 17 worlds and consumed billions of lives. They expect us to cower behind static defenses and die with dignity. Instead, we're going to teach them that when you stand with Earth, you gain allies who hit back. The response came from hundreds of ships across dozens of species, voices united in determination that transcended language and biology. For the first time since the Devourer crisis began, the galaxy was about to discover what happened. The first phase of the battle began not with massive fleet engagements, but with silence. As the Devourer ships approached the inner system, their sensors detected no organized resistance, no massed formations of defenders, no obvious targets for their overwhelming firepower. For entities that had perfected the art of systematic conquest through 17 previous victories, this absence of conventional opposition was deeply unsettling. Captain Elena Vasquez piloted her stealth corvette UES Shadow through the asteroid belt, her small ship's hull barely distinguishable from the surrounding rocks. Through her viewports she could see one of the massive Devourer vessels, its biomechanical surface pulsing with an alien vitality that made her skin crawl. The ship was easily 50 times the size of her corvette, its weapons capable of reducing entire cities to ash. Control. This is Shadow, she whispered into her communicator, knowing that even their encrypted channels might be monitored. I have visual on Devourer Primary. Beginning close-range reconnaissance. Admiral Rivera's voice crackled back through the quantum communication link. Copy, Shadow. Maintain position and observe. Let them show us their patterns. Across the system, dozens of similar scenes played out as human ships used their smaller size and superior stealth technology to get closer to the Devourer fleet than any previous defenders had managed. What they discovered challenged everything the galactic military had assumed about their enemy. Admiral, reported Commander Hayes from the Defiance's sensor station, we're picking up some unusual readings from the Devourer ships. It looks like they're scanning for specific energy signatures, probably looking for traditional defensive positions and fleet formations. Rivera studied the tactical display, watching as the Devourer vessels moved through search patterns that clearly expected to find orbital defense platforms, massed fighter squadrons, and concentrated capital ship formations. Their behavior suggested a level of tactical rigidity that came from too many easy victories. They've been fighting the same battle 17 times, Rivera realized. Every species they've faced has responded the same way, with the same strategies, the same defensive positions. They've optimized their approach for defeating conventional galactic military doctrine, which means they have no idea how to handle unconventional opposition, Hayes added with growing excitement. The Devourer fleet reached Proxima Centauri B and found empty space where they expected desperate resistance. The colonial defense platforms floated dark and apparently abandoned, their weapons powered down and their crews evacuated. For the first time in their campaign of conquest, the Devourer faced uncertainty. That uncertainty became vulnerability when the human attack began. Captain Vasquez watched through her scopes as the nearest Devourer ship extended what appeared to be harvesting appendages toward the planet's surface. These biomechanical tentacles were designed to penetrate planetary atmospheres and begin the systematic extraction of life energy that had made the Devourer so terrifyingly effective. All Shadow Squadron units, Vasquez transmitted, target those harvesting appendages. Let's see how they like having their tools broken. The attack came from 12 directions simultaneously, Human corvettes and frigates emerged from asteroid cover, weapon systems blazing with concentrated fire that targeted the most vulnerable parts of the Devourer vessels. The biomechanical harvesting appendages, designed for efficiency rather than defense, proved surprisingly fragile when subjected to sustained weapons fire. The first appendage severed in a spray of alien ichor that crystallized in the vacuum of space. The Devourer ship recoiled like a wounded animal, its massive bulk turning with surprising speed to locate its attackers. But the human ships were already gone, disappearing back into asteroid cover or behind planetary moons before the return fire could target them. Across the system, similar hit-and-run attacks erupted as human squadron leaders implemented tactics that had never been used in galactic warfare. Instead of standing and fighting, they struck and vanished. Instead of protecting fixed positions, they turned the entire system into a battlefield where every asteroid could hide an enemy, and every moon could conceal an ambush. Devourer response patterns are fascinating, reported Dr. Kim Chen, the fleet's xenobiology expert, from her position aboard the research vessel UES Discovery. They're trying to apply standard counterinsurgency protocols, but their technology is optimized for overwhelming stationary targets. They're having difficulty adapting to distributed mobile opposition. Admiral Rivera allowed himself a moment of satisfaction as he watched the tactical display. Red markers showing Devourer ships were beginning to spread out across the system as they tried to hunt down the elusive human squadrons. By abandoning formation integrity to pursue scattered targets, they were doing exactly what Rivera had hoped. Signal all units. Commence Phase 2, Rivera ordered. Time to show them what happens when the hunted become the hunters. The second phase began with the arrival of unexpected reinforcements. The colonial defense platforms that the Devourer ships had dismissed as abandoned suddenly blazed to life, their weapon systems powered by the planetary fusion reactors that had been deliberately hidden from sensors. But instead of targeting the massive Devourer vessels directly, they fired on the asteroids and debris that the human ships had seeded throughout the system. The result was spectacular. Asteroids exploded into clouds of high-velocity fragments that filled space with a deadly maze of projectiles. Ice comets were vaporized into expanding spheres of superheated plasma. Mining stations detonated in precisely timed explosions that turned valuable minerals into makeshift weapons. Within minutes, the Proxima Centauri system became a shooting gallery where every piece of debris was a potential missile. Every explosion created new hazards, and the Devourer ships found themselves trying to navigate through an ever-changing obstacle course while under constant attack from enemies they couldn't pin down. "Beautiful," whispered Captain Torres from her position aboard the destroyer UES Relentless as she watched a Devourer ship struggle to avoid a cloud of metallic fragments moving at significant fractions of light speed. They've never fought in an environment that actively opposed them, but the most devastating attack was yet to come. As the Devourer ship spread out further to avoid the debris fields, human engineers aboard the support vessels activated the real surprise. Hidden among the legitimate mining equipment and industrial installations were devices that humanity had never built before. Quantum disruption mines, based on theoretical physics that Earth scientists had developed specifically for this mission. The first mine detonated next to a Devourer ship that was pursuing a human corvette through the asteroid belt. Instead of a conventional explosion, space itself seemed to tear, creating a localized distortion that interfered with the biomechanical systems that powered the alien vessel. For 30 seconds, the massive ship lost propulsion, weapons, and life support as its quantum-based technologies struggled to function in the disrupted space-time. 30 seconds was enough. Human ships emerged from cover throughout the asteroid belt, concentrating their fire on the disabled vessel with a precision that would have made their ancestors at the Battle of Midway proud. When the quantum disruption field collapsed and normal space reasserted itself, the Devourer ship was dead in space. Its biomechanical hull breached in a dozen places. "First kill confirmed," reported Commander Hayes with barely controlled excitement. "The quantum disruption technology works," Rivera nodded grimly. "One ship down, 16 to go." But the psychological impact was far greater than the tactical advantage. For the first time since the crisis began, a Devourer vessel had been destroyed in combat. The entities that had seemed unstoppable suddenly looked vulnerable. The remaining Devourer ships began to retreat toward the outer system, their formation discipline completely broken, as individual vessels tried to escape the chaos that the Proxima Centauri system had become. But Rivera wasn't about to let them regroup. All units pursue and harass. Don't let them consolidate their position. Commander Hayes signaled the Calarian task force. Time for our allies to show what they can do. As the human fleet began its pursuit, Captain Vasquez reflected on the battle they had just fought. It wasn't the massive fleet engagement that military historians would have expected. Instead, it was something uniquely human, a refusal to fight the enemy's battle on the enemy's terms. By turning conventional military wisdom on its head, they had achieved something that 17 previous defenders had failed to accomplish. They had made the Devourer afraid. The pursuit through the outer system would test whether human ingenuity could overcome the technological advantages that had made the Devourer seemingly unstoppable. But for the first time since the crisis began, the hunters had become the hunted, and the galaxy was watching to see if humanity's promise to never surrender could actually lead to victory. The pursuit lasted 18 hours and covered 3 star systems, as the damaged Devourer fleet attempted to reach what their communications indicated was a rally point near the galactic rim. Admiral Rivera's combined fleet followed relentlessly, using hit-and-run tactics that prevented the enemy from regrouping, while gradually wearing down their defenses. "Admiral," Commander Hayes reported from her tactical station, "the Calarian task force is reporting successful interdiction of 2 Devourer vessels near the Vega system. They're using our quantum disruption technology in combination with their own gravitational manipulation devices." Rivera smiled with genuine pride. The younger species that had supported Earth's proposal were proving themselves to be quick learners and adaptable fighters. The Calarians had taken human tactical innovations and improved upon them, while the Frontier Alliance squadrons had developed entirely new approaches based on their species' unique capabilities. "Any word from Ambassador Chen?" Rivera asked. "The Council Station is monitoring our progress," Hayes replied. "The ambassador reports that several additional species have requested permission to join the operation. It seems that news of our success is spreading faster than we are." The news was indeed spreading throughout the galaxy with unprecedented speed. For the first time in the Devourer crisis, defenders had not just survived an attack but had actively driven off the enemy. The psychological impact was enormous, as species that had resigned themselves to manage decline suddenly began to consider the possibility of victory. On the bridge of the UES Defiance, Rivera studied the long-range sensors that showed the Devourer fleet approaching what appeared to be a massive space station positioned at the edge of explored space. The structure was unlike anything in galactic databases, its biomechanical architecture suggesting it was built by the same entities that had created the Devourer vessels. "Commander, what are we looking at?" Rivera asked his science officer. "Initial scan suggested some kind of processing facility," Lieutenant Commander Park replied, his voice tight with disgust. "Energy readings indicate massive biomechanical systems, possibly for converting harvested life energy into whatever the Devourers use for sustenance and reproduction." The realization hit Rivera like a physical blow. This wasn't just a rally point, it was a feeding station. The lives of billions of beings from 17 different worlds were being processed in that abomination, their essence converted into fuel for further conquest. "Signal the fleet," Rivera ordered, his voice carrying a cold fury that every member of his crew recognized. "We found their nest. Time to burn it down." But as the combined fleet approached the facility, long-range sensors detected something that changed everything. The station wasn't just a processing facility, it was a shipyard. Dozens of new Devourer vessels were under construction, each one larger and more sophisticated than those they had just fought. Worse still, the biomechanical construction systems appeared to be incorporating technologies harvested from conquered civilizations. "Sir," reported Captain Vasquez from her corvette's advanced reconnaissance position, "I'm detecting familiar energy signatures in some of those ships under construction. It looks like they're incorporating Calarian gravitational systems, Vorthak crystalline matrices, and even some technology that resembles our own quantum drives." The implications were staggering. The Devourer wasn't just consuming worlds for sustenance, it was learning from each conquest, incorporating the best technologies of defeated civilizations into increasingly powerful weapons. Given enough time and resources, it would become unstoppable by any conventional means. "Admiral Rivera," came the voice of Governor Thelnara from Proxima Centauri B. Our colonial governments are reporting something extraordinary. The life energy readings from our worlds are increasing rather than decreasing. It appears that your victory has somehow reversed the Devourer's harvesting effects. Dr. Chen's voice cut through the bridge communications from her research vessel. Admiral, I believe I understand what's happening. The Devourer's harvesting process creates a quantum entanglement between the consumed life energy and the source worlds. When we destroyed one of their ships, we severed that connection and caused the harvested energy to return to its point of origin. Rivera felt a surge of hope mixed with determination. They weren't just fighting to stop further conquests. They were fighting to resurrect entire civilizations that had been consumed. Every Devourer ship they destroyed would return billions of lives to the galaxy. All ships, Rivera announced over the fleet-wide communications. We've just learned that our mission has expanded. We're not just defending the remaining colonies. We're liberating the conquered ones. Every enemy vessel we destroy brings back worlds that were thought lost forever. The response from the combined fleet was immediate and overwhelming. Ships from dozens of species, crews who had volunteered for what they thought was a desperate defensive action, suddenly found themselves part of a liberation campaign with stakes beyond imagination. As they approached the Devourer facility, Rivera implemented the most audacious tactical plan in human military history. Instead of concentrating their forces for a direct assault, he ordered the fleet to split into 7 separate task forces, each approaching the facility from a different vector. You want us to attack a heavily fortified shipyard with divided forces? Asked Captain Liu from the heavy cruiser UES Indomitable, his voice carrying the skepticism of a career military officer. I want us to do something the Devourer will never expect, Rivera replied. They've learned to counter massed formations and concentrated firepower. They've never faced an enemy willing to split their forces and attack from multiple directions simultaneously. The approach to the facility revealed its true scale. The biomechanical structure stretched for thousands of kilometers, its surface writhing with construction activity as new Devourer vessels took shape within protective construction matrices. Defensive installations dotted the structure's surface, their weapons trained on the approaching human fleet. Contact in 30 minutes, reported Commander Hayes. All task forces are in position. Rivera opened a channel to the entire fleet, knowing that what he said next would either inspire the greatest victory in galactic history or serve as humanity's epitaph. Ships of the combined fleet. In a few minutes, we're going to assault a facility that represents everything evil about the Devourer's campaign of conquest. Inside that structure are the consumed essences of billions of beings who trusted the galaxy to protect them. Today we proved that trust wasn't misplaced. He paused, looking around his bridge at officers and crew who had volunteered for this mission, knowing they might not survive it. When our ancestors first looked up at the stars, they dreamed of finding other life, other civilizations to befriend and learn from. Today we honor that dream by standing with allies who share our refusal to surrender. Today we show the galaxy what humans do when faced with impossible odds. Rivera took a deep breath before delivering the words that would echo through galactic history. All task forces, commence attack. Let's go save some worlds. The 7-pronged assault began with a coordinated quantum disruption bombardment that disabled a significant portion of the facility's defensive systems. As Devourer ships scrambled to respond to attacks from multiple directions, human squadrons penetrated the facility's outer defenses using tactics that combined the best elements of every species in the combined fleet. Calarian ships used gravitational manipulation to create artificial asteroid fields that confused enemy targeting systems. Frontier Alliance vessels employed exotic energy weapons that disrupted biomechanical systems at the molecular level. Human ships coordinated the assault with a flexibility and adaptability that kept the Devourer forces constantly off balance. But the real breakthrough came when Captain Vasquez's reconnaissance team discovered the facility's central processing core, a massive biomechanical heart that coordinated the conversion of harvested life energy. The structure pulsed with the combined essence of 17 conquered worlds, a repository of death that powered the Devourer's expansion. Admiral, Vasquez reported over the tactical channel, I found their weak point. If we can destroy the central processor, it should disrupt their entire operation and release all the stored life energy simultaneously. Rivera smiled grimly as he realized what that meant. Destroying the processor wouldn't just cripple the facility, it would resurrect every world the Devourer had consumed. Billions of lives hung in the balance of the next few minutes. All task forces, converge on the central processor. Time to bring our people home. The final assault on the central processor required everything the combined fleet could give. Admiral Rivera watched from the bridge of the Defiance as 7 task forces converged on the massive, biomechanical heart of the Devourer facility. Their ships weaving through defensive fire that lit up space like a deadly aurora. "Quantum disruption mines are in position," reported Captain Torres from her destroyer squadron. "Ready for synchronized detonation on your command." Rivera studied the tactical display, noting how the Devourer defenders were finally beginning to adapt to human tactics. Their response times were improving, their formation adjustments becoming more effective. The enemy was learning, just as they had learned from 17 previous conquests. "Sir," Commander Hayes called out urgently. "Massive energy buildup detected from the central processor. It looks like they're trying to initiate some kind of emergency transfer protocol." Dr. Chen's voice crackled over the communication system from her research vessel, now positioned dangerously close to the facility's outer hull. "Admiral, if they complete that transfer, they'll disperse all the harvested life energy into their remaining ships. We'll lose any chance of restoration, and their fleet will become exponentially more powerful." The timer was running out. Rivera had perhaps minutes before the Devourers succeeded in preserving their stolen power and escaping to continue their campaign of conquest. But the central processor was protected by layers of defensive systems that would require time to penetrate. Time they didn't have. That's when Captain Elena Vasquez made the decision that would define the battle and change galactic history. "Admiral," her voice came over the communication channel with the calm certainty of someone who had already accepted the consequences of her choice. "The Shadow can penetrate the processor's defenses if I take her in close enough. 1 ship, full speed. Quantum disruption warheads armed for internal detonation." Rivera understood immediately what she was proposing. A suicide run, punching through the facility's defenses to deliver their most powerful weapons directly into the heart of the processing system. It was tactically sound and strategically necessary, but it meant certain death for Vasquez and her crew. "Captain, there has to be another way," Rivera said, though even as he spoke he knew there wasn't. "Sir, with respect, this is what humans do. When someone stands with Earth, they gain allies who never surrender. Today, the Shadow stands with 17 conquered worlds." Across the fleet, similar conversations were taking place as crews realized what the mission required. The Calarian Task Force commander, Captain Morthick, volunteered his fastest ship for a parallel assault. Commander Singh of the Frontier Alliance offered his squadron for a diversionary attack that would draw defensive fire away from the main strike. But it was the response from the youngest members of the fleet that truly captured the spirit of what humanity had brought to the galaxy. Ensign Park, barely 22 years old and fresh from the academy, spoke for his entire generation when he transmitted from his fighter squadron. "Admiral, we came out here to prove that the galaxy doesn't have to accept defeat. Let us prove it." Rivera felt the weight of command settle on his shoulders as he realized that victory would require sacrifices that no military manual had prepared him for. But he also recognized something that the elder species of the galaxy had forgotten in their millions of years of careful survival. Sometimes the greatest victories come from those willing to pay the highest price. "All ships," Rivera announced over the fleet-wide channel, "prepare for final assault. Multiple strike teams, maximum coordination. We're going to hit them with everything we have." The attack began with the largest quantum disruption bombardment ever attempted. Mines detonated throughout the facility's defensive perimeter, creating pockets of distorted space-time that confused targeting systems and disrupted energy flows. Under cover of this chaos, assault teams from multiple species drove toward the central processor with a determination that transcended individual survival. Captain Vasquez's Corvette Shadow led the main strike, her ship's stealth systems allowing her to penetrate deeper into the facility than larger vessels could manage. Behind her came a stream of fighters and bombers, their pilots knowing that few would survive the mission but determined to ensure its success. The Devourer's final defenses were unlike anything they had faced before. Biomechanical weapons that seemed to anticipate their moves, energy barriers that adapted to different types of attack, and swarms of smaller vessels that emerged from the facility's internal structures like antibodies, responding to an infection. Shadow to defiance, Vasquez reported as her ship took heavy damage from defensive fire. We're through the outer perimeter, beginning final approach to the processor core. Rivera watched the tactical display as the small ship dove into the heart of the massive structure, disappearing into a maze of biomechanical passages and defensive installations. For long minutes, the only indication of the Shadow's progress was the occasional explosion as defensive systems were destroyed from within. Then Vasquez's voice came over the communication channel one last time, clear and steady despite the chaos surrounding her. Admiral, we're in position. The processor core is directly ahead. Tell my sister I kept my promise. The explosion that followed lit up the facility like a new star. The Shadow's quantum disruption warheads detonated simultaneously inside the central processor, creating a cascade failure that rippled through the entire structure. Biomechanical systems that had operated for decades suddenly went dark. Construction bays fell silent, and the massive energy flows that powered the Devourer's operations began to collapse. But the most spectacular effect was the release of the harvested life energy. Streams of pure life force erupted from the collapsing processor, spreading outward from the facility in waves that could be detected across multiple star systems. As the energy reached critical mass, it began to reverse its quantum entanglement with the consumed worlds. Admiral, Dr. Chen reported with wonder in her voice, we're detecting massive energy discharges in all 17 previously consumed systems. The life energy is returning to its points of origin. Across the galaxy, dead worlds began to live again. Planets that had been stripped of all biological activity suddenly pulsed with returning life, as the stolen essence of billions of beings flowed back to where it belonged. Cities that had stood empty for months began to show signs of activity, as the quantum echoes of their former inhabitants coalesced back into living beings. The facility itself was collapsing, its biomechanical structure unable to maintain coherence without the central processor. Devourer ships tried to escape the destruction, but many were caught in the cascade failure as their own biomechanical systems began to shut down. All ships, withdraw to safe distance, Rivera ordered, though his eyes remained fixed on the expanding sphere of destruction that had once been the Devourer's primary base of operations. As the combined fleet pulled back, reports began flooding in from across the galaxy. The 17 conquered worlds were indeed returning to life, their populations restored by the release of their harvested essence. The Devourer fleet, deprived of its central coordination and primary source of power, was fragmenting into isolated groups that posed far less threat than the unified force that had terrorized the galaxy. Signal from Ambassador Chen at the Council Station, Commander Hayes reported. She says the Council is detecting life signs returning to normal levels on all 17 previously consumed worlds. She also reports that 43 additional species have requested to join the defense initiative. Rivera nodded, though his thoughts were with Captain Vasquez and the other crews who hadn't survived to see their victory. They had volunteered for what many considered a suicide mission, and they had proven that sometimes the impossible just required someone willing to try. 3 days later, Rivera stood before the Galactic Council as the first human to address the Assembly as a full member, rather than a supplicant. The chamber was packed with representatives from species that had never shown interest in council proceedings. Drawn by reports of a young civilization that had achieved the impossible. Honored representatives, Rivera began, I stand before you not to boast of victory, but to honor sacrifice. The defeat of the Devourer was achieved through the combined efforts of dozens of species who chose cooperation over isolation, hope over despair. He paused, looking out over the assembled delegates. When Ambassador Chen first proposed that Earth be allowed to coordinate Outer Rim defense, many of you questioned what a young species could offer that ancient civilizations could not provide. Today I can answer that question. Rivera activated a holographic display showing the current state of the galaxy. Green markers indicated restored worlds, blue showed active defense networks, and gold represented new alliances formed during the crisis. We offered something that experience had taught you to abandon, the belief that victory is always possible if you're willing to pay the price for it. We offered the conviction that no sacrifice is too great if it means protecting those who stand with you. The chamber erupted in a